Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Season 1 of the TV version of Building the Future is now streaming online at buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Mike Lingle. He's an entrepreneur, mentor, and advisor to startups. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. We met in Florida at the Startup Expo, and we hung out a bunch, and I thought, wow, this guy's done a lot of stuff. You were on a couple panels and speaking at the conference. And I thought, well, let's have this guy on the show. You've done a lot of really cool things. You sold a company. You're kind of mentoring. But maybe kind of before we get into exactly what you're doing and your kind of past, let's get to know you a little bit better and maybe start off with where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. And I just want to take a second to give a shout out to the Startup Expo conference.
Sure.
Which Bob Fitz did an amazing job of assembling some terrific people.
I agree, 100% agree.
And I had a bunch of great conversations, made a bunch of really good contacts, people I'm still talking to, some of whom I'm working with, and it was just a nice little conference in Fort Lauderdale, which I wasn't expecting.
Sure. The one thing that I found, and I'm curious to know if you found the same thing, is I've never been to a conference where pretty much everybody was so open to network.
Yeah, it really was. Like, it wasn't a giant conference. It was kind of small, but it was really a pond was stocked with some terrific people, all of whom wanted to talk.
Sure. Yeah, it was like almost like if you just made eye contact with somebody, like one of you was introducing yourself to somebody, right? And that's awesome. And I love that.
And everyone was doing something cool and was interesting to talk to. Like, it wasn't just idle conversation. Like,
totally.
It was informative and useful. And again, like, I found a bunch of people who I'm still talking to and or working with.
Totally. Well, and you and I are the perfect example of that, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, no, very cool.
So I will plan to be back at the Startup Expo in Fort Lauderdale next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can make it down as well because, like we just said, it was awesome and I had a great time.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. So yeah, maybe we'll start off with kind of where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. So I did most of my growing up in New Jersey. I was actually born in Venezuela because my parents met in the Peace Corps.
Really? Interesting.
But yeah, we only lived there till I was 1, and I haven't been back, and it seems like not the best time to go back to Venezuela right now.
Sure.
Although my dad has a 50-year reunion in Chile coming up in the fall, so I think maybe I might go do that.
That'd be awesome.
That seems like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Sure.
But both my parents were actually from Ohio.
Okay.
So we moved to Ohio, and they both went to graduate school at Ohio State. And then when I was like 6 or 7, maybe, we moved to New Jersey.
Okay.
My dad got a job teaching at Rutgers.
Very cool.
So most of my real formative years were in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I actually became obsessed with architecture. I went to a high school that had an architecture program. So I took 3 years of architecture classes, worked for a couple architects, including Michael Graves, who was based in Princeton.
Wow, very cool.
And thought I wanted to be an architect, and went to college, and then I went to college in Philadelphia at Penn, and then worked for an architect, stuck around in Philadelphia, worked for an architect for a year and a half after that, and kind of fell out of love with architecture.
Okay, why?
Unfortunately, because I wasn't getting to design anything.
Okay.
And I wasn't going to get to design anything for a really long time.
I got you.
And I wasn't making any money. So it's sort of a bad combination of, like, it was going to take a really long time of not making much money in order to get to do anything cool.
Sure.
And I actually remember I think I asked for a raise from like $10 an hour to $14 an hour or something. And the architect I was working for looked at me and said for $14 an hour, he could get someone who was a licensed architect with 10 years of experience. And I looked at him and said, I'd definitely quit then.
I got you.
Because it was just, like, the road was just too long. And I don't know, I had sort of fallen out of love with it. But what did happen is I had gotten into sort of the 3D modeling and rendering stuff. That was right when, like, Jurassic Park came out, the original Jurassic Park, and, like, Terminator 2, and special effects were really, it was an amazing thing happening with computers. And I'd gotten into a little bit of that through the architecture. So building 3D models of things that didn't exist and then making them look as photorealistic as possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I had a buddy named Mitch in Philadelphia, and he turned me on to multimedia programming. So there was an environment called Director.
Yeah, I remember those
It
days.
was made by a company called Backer Media.
Yep.
It got bought by Adobe eventually, and that was sort of the precursor to Flash.
Totally.
And he turned me on to Director, and I had grown up. I should say I had grown up with my dad. Loved computers and was a professor of statistics and psychology. So he was always running tests on computers, and we had computers even for the Apple. We had a TRX-80.
That's
in
awesome.
Our house. Yeah. So I had grown up. He had taught me how to program. I had grown up around computers. I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to campus at Ohio State, and he was doing the big mainframes with punch cards.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So my friend Mitch turned me on to Director, and I had a bunch of the graphic skills, and then he turned me on to the programming stuff, and it was like I could build software, and it actually scratched the architecture itch. There was the software piece, which is the engineering, so you had to build a structure, engineer something that was going to work. And then there was a design component. You had to create an environment that people could look at and understand how to use.
Sure.
And I could do it right then. I didn't have to get the license and do the apprenticeship. I could just do it. And if I made something cool, people would use it.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I totally got hooked on that. And then Mitch and I moved to New York and shared an apartment for a year and a half.
Okay. What made you move to New York, just out of curiosity?
So we were in Philly, and we had a couple conversations where we were like, there is no way we are going to make it in the software business in Philadelphia.
Got you.
So we either need to move to New York or to San Francisco.
Got you.
And so what the plan we came up with was to move to New York for a couple of years and then move to San Francisco after 2 years in New York.
Got you.
And we took different paths in New York. He bought a Silicon Graphics workstation.
Okay.
And he was doing a bunch of rendering and custom programming, sort of high-end graphic stuff, and a little bit of software development stuff. And he was really good. And he was making like graphics for the Blue Man Group and doing all kinds of cool stuff.
Oh, very cool.
And I got a job building educational multimedia software for Columbia University.
Oh, very
cool. Columbia has an earth science lab that's across the river from New York City, across the GW Bridge in the Palisades.
Okay.
And they had a bunch of scientists collecting earth science data, and they wanted to bring that into the classroom to educate students.
That's funny because that was one of my first jobs too, was building like educational DVDs at the university here. Yeah, and we had to like even film sometimes like conferences, and then we use like Director and Flash to actually make the whole thing like interactive, and then there was like quizzes and stuff. So like that's hilarious that we basically had this similar start.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were doing. So they had a grant, and so they had some earth science data. So we started with seismology, earthquakes.
Okay, very cool.
And then they had a panel of high school teachers, so we could bounce ideas off of them, and then a bunch of student testers, so we could take stuff into classrooms and see if it was working. And my job was to kind of stitch it all together.
Okay.
And it was great because I could build, I had all this data, but I could build this cool environment for the students to learn.
Right.
Had a great time doing that, and then got pulled into a multimedia company in New York City.
Okay.
Which was a little more fast-paced. They were doing lots of different projects for different companies.
Okay.
So I worked there for like 3 months, and it was actually kind of a mess. Like the people working there were great, but the company was falling apart.
Okay.
And it was kind of blowing up. But it got me, really good at doing projects quickly.
Okay.
And I actually went out on my own after about 3 or 4 months there.
Okay.
There was a guy down the hall from that company who had a space he was working out of, and he offered me a desk. And I just started freelancing, building basically one-off multimedia things for companies. So, and I got some pretty high-profile clients quickly. Like I did a kiosk for the window of Pfizer's headquarters.
Oh, wow.
I did a kiosk for an IBM thing for the Olympics. They had a bus going around the country.
Oh, wow.
Carrying the torch. So I had a kiosk that was in that, like an interactive thing that was in that bus.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. I was doing all kinds of like really neat stuff, and it was just quick and, building these projects and trying to make them look as cool as possible. It was a lot of like corporate stuff, product launch stuff, presentation stuff. And in the middle of that, Mitch picked up and moved to San Francisco.
Okay.
And I stayed in New York.
Got you.
And so I spent another 20 years in New York. But he had had enough of New York and moved out to San Francisco and started doing building gaming for the casino industry.
Okay, interesting.
And then eventually Mitch got into digital signage. So they actually built. He founded a company and they raised some VC money that did the big Fresh Direct sign, the one that you see from the highway coming into New York. Yeah, his technology powered that sign.
Very cool.
So he went off and did that, and then I stayed in New York, and I was doing these sort of business one-off things. And then in like '95, I got hired by the Discovery Channel through a design firm called Marcolina Design. They actually got the contract and hired me to do the programming to build a sales tool for the Discovery Channel.
Okay, interesting.
So Discovery had, when you turn on the Discovery Channel, you see ads, right?
Yep.
So Discovery has a sales force that sells those ads to the advertisers. And what Discovery wanted was they wanted a presentation system that looked like television, but was editable like PowerPoint.
Got you.
And they wanted to be able to build a giant library of all the different programs that were running on the network, and then all the different demographic information about who was watching the programs.
Okay, interesting.
And so when they went to an advertiser, like if they were going to Procter & Gamble who wanted to sell Tide, they would pull all the relevant soccer mom info. Versus if they were going to Ford who wanted to sell Mustangs, they would pull entirely different info that would appeal to, men or young men or whatever it was.
Got you.
So it's kind of a giant library of content, but it needs to be sliced and diced quickly by a salesperson walking into a meeting. And then they wanted marketing. So if you think about the way Discovery is set up, they have salespeople out selling these ads, but there's a marketing team supporting the salespeople.
Sure.
And they wanted marketing to have the ability to retroactively update the sales presentations.
Oh, interesting. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So as numbers change, demographics change, ratings change, new programs are created, programs are taken off the air. There's sort of a living, breathing library of content. And one of the big problems with PowerPoint at that time, and actually still, is if I'm a sales guy, I'm creating, I'm spinning off presentations every time I go to a meeting, but those presentations are cut off from reality. Mm-hmm. So marketing wanted the ability to go in retroactively and update that stuff, so the presentations would remain live and current and accurate.
Right. Okay.
So we
No, go ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
So we built a couple versions of that for Discovery,
Okay.
and it really went well internally. And actually, the guy who spearheaded that project inside Discovery was a young executive who ended up getting promoted, and it was just like, it just went really well inside Discovery. And I looked at that, and I was like, this is a product.
Sure.
That I can sell to other people. And I talked about this at the Startup Expo conference. That was actually one of my first big failures in business.
Okay.
I had a business partner I was working with who helped put the proposal together and helped us sell this into Discovery, and then just disappeared. So, like, I actually executed the project for Discovery.
Got you.
And then once the project was successful, the guy we had been working with, the executive in Discovery, got promoted, and they brought in some new guy.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't really have a strong relationship with the new guy. And it's a lesson as an executive and as a salesperson. Like, you have to keep those relationships alive, even when the people you're working with are moving around inside the organization.
Sure.
And then my business partner came back and freaked out and decided he hated the new guy and wrote this letter to his boss, the new guy's boss, about why the new guy wasn't a good choice. And the boss printed out the letter and left it on the printer, so the dude found it. And it was like a mess. So they brought in another vendor and like pushed us out of Discovery, and it was bad, right? It's one of those moments in business where you're like, holy crap, this was amazing, and now it's terrible.
Sure. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. So good teaching moment, right?
Sure.
But it also taught me that I couldn't have all my eggs in one basket, and I needed to have, lots of different customers if I was really going to have a product company.
Sure.
And so what happened was I went and started selling that into other television networks. And actually, I went and got a new business partner. I fired the one guy. I divorced the one guy.
Sure.
And got a new guy who was a really good graphic designer.
Okay.
And it's sort of a hybrid product design business.
Got you.
Because a lot of these companies needed help because they needed content for their presentations.
Right.
And so part of what we were selling was this functionality, but part of what we were selling was your presentations are going to look like television, so someone needed to create that. And sometimes the company could do it themselves, but sometimes we needed to provide the design.
Right.
So I went and found an amazing designer named Jalon Cole, and he and I were partners for a few years, and we just went and sold into everyone, every other television network we could sell into. And I remember, it's funny, we were kids. I think I started my first company when I was 25, and we were like 27 maybe.
Okay. So how did you go about?
And I remember.
How did you go about reaching out to these other big kind of television networks?
It's the same as reaching out to anyone else.
Okay.
You just gotta try.
Okay.
It's easier now because we have LinkedIn.
Sure.
So, my process now is I build my LinkedIn network as big as I can.
Sure.
So that lets me see into a lot of companies.
I'm the same way.
And then if I want to get into a company, I can look up in that company and see who I know.
Sure.
I can target particular job titles. And then I can usually figure out their email address.
Sure.
There's a site called mailtester.com that lets you construct an email address and then test it. So usually I can either get an intro or I can just figure out the email address and email the person directly.
Got you.
And if I'm offering something of value, I can often get a conversation started. I may have to reach out to multiple people in the company, but I can usually get someone to at least listen to me and say yes or no.
I think that's really good advice, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I learned early on not to be intimidated by the size of the company, and I think that is important advice.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
It's just as easy to reach out to someone in a company as it is to reach out to anyone else. You just have to be offering value.
Makes
right?
sense.
So if I'm showing up and saying, here's something that's working with Discovery that we built and we want to do the same thing for you, can we talk about it? I can at least usually get a conversation or at least a yes or a no.
Sure. And they'll give you 20 minutes or a half hour or whatever, right, to at least explore that, especially when you're telling them their competition's using this.
Yeah, exactly. That definitely draws some attention. And I can still usually get people to talk to me if I ask for advice. That's
fair.
sort of the non-threatening way to say, look, I'm trying to break into this industry. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Can you give me the lay of the land? I can often get someone to talk to me that way, too.
That's good advice.
And the trick is to keep it short and interesting.
Fair.
I'm sending 3-sentence emails and trying to make them as punchy as possible. I'm not sending paragraphs of, not making people read a lot or feel like they have to do a lot.
No, that's really good advice. I find that, and I'm curious to know yourself, if I get an email, whether it's on LinkedIn or just in my inbox, and if it's paragraphs long, I maybe read the first sentence or two. And if I'm not interested, I just mark it as done. And it's like, people are busy, right? And they're not trying to be mean or a jerk about it. It's just they don't have time to spend 20 minutes reading your paragraph long thing, right? It's just that's the reality.
Right. And I definitely don't want to get on the phone with someone who is a really long waiter because I just assume it's going to be a really long conversation.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of it like that. But yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense.
And actually, I noticed it in the business community and in the investor community. Like when you're emailing really successful investors, they're emailing back 1 sentence or 2 sentences.
Okay, that's good advice.
Business people, you get a few more sentences, but not many more.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So at what point was how did kind of Tonic Studios go to Slide Rocket? How did that kind of come about? You have a product now, you're trying to get into other networks. Kind of walk me through that whole thing.
And we've got a design team that's part of our company.
Okay.
And basically, at that point, because we were kids and because neither of us had been to business school, in retrospect, we were doing a good job with the customer. We were doing a reasonable job with the product.
Okay.
We had revenue coming in, but we didn't really understand financially how to run a company.
Got you.
So we were basically borrowing from future revenues to pay current employees, and we had no cash buffer. So we were always, just barely making payroll every month, which was fine as long as we were growing.
Right.
But what happened was we hit the slowdown in 2000 that simultaneously hit tech companies and hit advertising, and our big market was advertising.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, we ran out of money quickly.
So did you raise money originally, or how did you guys fund
this? We did not raise. We were self-funded.
Okay.
I didn't understand anything about raising money at that point.
Okay. And so the crash happened.
Right, and what I was trying to do was go to customers and get them to, pay more, essentially to finance technology, our technology development. And what I discovered was big companies don't want to do that for the most part.
Okay.
They don't, and things have changed a lot. This was in the 90s and early 2000s.
Sure.
So, now it's a little bit easier to get a company to agree to that, but it's still, they're not in the business of taking risks on technology development. They're in the business of optimizing for revenue and cost savings.
Right.
So it's more like they want you to come to them with a finished solution.
Got you. Which is actually really good advice, right? And even now.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the nice things about what we were doing with sales presentations was even in a downturn, you could make the argument that we were helping sales.
Sure.
And even in a downturn, sales had budget because revenue was always important.
Right. Yeah, fair enough, right?
Right. So if you can go in there and say, we're going to make you money and or we're going to save you money, people will listen to that.
Sure. Especially in a recession.
Especially in a recession. That being said, we had one day where we had to lay off most of our staff, and it was kind of a mess, and my business partner ended up leaving as part of that.
Okay.
And that was a really tough time. And because we hadn't taken any money, I ended up massively in debt.
Okay.
Because I was I was essentially using my own money and family money. So, I had used up a bunch of my savings. I owed my family money, and I owed bank money, and everything had kind of fallen apart.
Wow.
And I got my dad to put in another bit of money.
Okay.
And we were about to relaunch, and then 9/11 happened, and we were actually pretty close to the trade center, so our office was shut down for a week, and commerce just kind of stopped again.
Sure.
So I don't know. It just got all bad for a while, and it didn't look like it was going to get better for a while. So the company got even smaller.
Okay.
And again, I don't recommend running a business on no margin, because you never know how bad it's going to get.
No, it makes sense. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in that instance, things were like piling on top of each other, so like we couldn't catch a break for a few years.
Sure. Well, but I think that's also really good advice, right? Because you basically stuck it out, and you were at it for a number of years.
Oh yeah. It took me 15 years.
Yeah.
To get this idea working the way I wanted to, and even then, I'll get to this in a second. It didn't end the way I had envisioned.
Sure.
Okay,
but
yeah,
you recovered from 9/11, basically.
Right, which took a while, and I started being more flexible with the design, because we still sometimes had to solve the design problem, but we got the product to a point where people could use it themselves, and it was pretty straightforward.
Got you.
And we could train them, and they could build their own content. I did have one designer in the company who did a bunch of our marketing stuff, but could also do customer stuff.
Okay.
And sometimes what we would do is set the customer up with templates. We couldn't really have canned templates because we were working with giant companies.
Right.
So they wanted their own branding.
Yeah, which makes sense.
But we could build them customized templates that they could then use to generate content.
I got you. Based on their branding guidelines.
Based on their branding guidelines.
Got you.
And then we also started partnering with third-party design firms. So we had kind of a group of people who were vetted and knew our software that we could bring to the table.
Okay.
And some of them would bring customers to us. So we built out a channel essentially through third-party design firms.
Interesting. That's actually really good advice, right? Like partner with people to bring you more clients.
Yeah, and it sort of works.
Okay.
Every once in a while you find someone who gets really excited about it and does a bunch of work and really brings you some value. But you really have to talk to a lot of people. Like most companies aren't that good at selling someone else's product.
That's also good advice.
Nor will they fight for someone else's product if it's going to affect their ability to sell.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if I can close the deal without you, and bringing you in makes it so that I might not be able to close the deal, I'm not going to talk about you anymore.
Fair enough.
So people wouldn't really fight for us, but every once in a while we find a partner who is really good and who would deliver value.
Okay.
And we had a sort of a broader group of people who we could bring content to, or clients to, and that mostly worked. Every once in a while they would mess up, and that would affect our relationship with the customer. So, you just got to be careful. Like anything else in business, you got to work with people you can trust.
Gotcha.
And it takes a little while to build that trust.
Sure. Okay.
But
go ahead.
We brought it back, So we brought it back, and we were selling, and the company was like super lean because we had outsourced. We had outsourced a lot of the design piece. I was doing a bunch of the development and the sales. I had some outsourced development as well.
Okay.
Overseas
or in North America? Did you have your outsourced
in North
development?
America?
Okay.
In North America.
Okay.
we brought it back, and I started paying down a bunch of the debt, and we started growing and signing up more customers. It was really lean for a while. I remember at one point, I signed HBO as a client.
Wow.
And I was the only person in the office at that moment. I told this story at Startup Expo also.
Yeah, I remember the story, but for the listener.
Yeah, so, I'm the only person there. Everything else is outsourced at that point. And I sold this giant contract to HBO to, support their sales team. They're out selling with this thing, so it's pretty vital to HBO.
Sure.
And, I was making it work with this small team. And I just remember, standing up at the office and being like, this is awesome. And there was no one really to hear, but it was working. We were able to sign customers like that, and I was able to do it with this outsourced team, and the whole thing was sort of coming back to life. The problem was the debt overhang was big enough that we were paying down the debt, but I didn't have the money I needed to really move the business forward and move the technology forward.
Got you.
And so at that moment, I got back in contact with Mitch, the guy who I'd moved to New York with.
Right.
And his digital signs thing had kind of blown up. They'd done a Series E of venture, so he was still involved, but basically had no equity left in the company.
Got you.
And was looking for the next thing. And I think it was actually an acquisition. And he made a little bit of money, but nothing major. Certainly not as a founder of the company.
Sure.
And so he was looking for the next thing, and he and I started talking, and I was like, look, I've got these big customers, and I need to figure out the next version of this thing, which is going to be on the cloud, and this was 2006, so it was early days for the cloud.
Right.
And Mitch had been doing a bunch of development with Flash and with Flex, which was the Flash development environment that had come out. And he was like, look, we can build this thing in Flex. And I said, great, let's partner up and do this.
Interesting.
So we spent a few years building this thing out, and ended up with a pretty amazing product called SlideRocket.
Right.
And the original vision was to bring, I had all these enterprise customers, and the original vision was to bring those enterprise customers over onto the SlideRocket platform.
Got you.
So I went around and talked to HBO and Sony and NBC and all these people I was working with, and they all sounded really excited about this new idea.
Okay.
And Mitch was an amazing programmer, and he put a lot of hours into building software. And in 2009, I guess, we started going around to venture capital firms and got a firm called Hummer Windblad to put a couple $1 million into the company. And we had a working prototype at that point, and I had these customers who, the Hummer Windblad got on the phone with, and HBO said, yep, we'll come over when this thing's working.
Okay, interesting.
So, we had a working product and we had customer validation. And I think those are the things that really made them invest. I think also Mitch had done such, Mitch was such a rock star with software. Part of the investment was also they were just impressed with him and with SlideRocket and felt like, okay, there's all the pieces we need here.
Sure.
And so we got the money, started building the company in San Francisco. I was in New York. Mitch still lived in San Francisco. I still lived in New York. I was keeping the existing customers happy using the platform that I had, and then we started hiring in San Francisco, building out the platform, started to bring customers on. I started bringing bigger customers into the beta. We got written up in TechCrunch. We had all kinds of interest. We were getting hundreds of signups a day, which was great for me as a salesperson because some of those were corporate customers, so I had all kinds of warm leads coming in the door.
Sure, that's awesome.
We also had a ton of individuals and a lot of schools, a lot of educational institutions, because it was great for the classroom.
Right.
And so it was like super exciting times. And the only problem was that Mitch and I were fighting like cats and dogs.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. And it ended up, I think part of the stress was, my vision was really around enterprise. And I think his vision ended up being more around individuals and education.
Okay.
And I think, I see this now. I think there's two ways to grow a company. There's revenue, and then there's user growth.
Right.
And if you're lucky, you can do both of them together.
Sure.
But a lot of times you'll see a company focus on one or the other.
Okay.
So Facebook is kind of the poster boy of user growth over revenue. But I tend to think more in terms of revenue. So for me, I want a working company that can survive on its own,
Sure.
especially after watching my company blow up and being in debt.
Yep, that's fair.
But it's totally valid to go after user growth and not worry about revenue as much, as long as you have enough user growth that it's interesting to investors, because you're going to, you need cash from somewhere.
Sure.
Right. And I think that was really kind of the stress in the company. Like, I was thinking enterprise, Mitch wanted to go after user growth. I was bringing these big companies in the door, and they were unhappy because they weren't getting, what they needed in order to move. We're talking about like HBO's sales team. So it's got to be, they need a bunch of attention to really feel comfortable moving their sales team onto a platform. So like everyone was unhappy.
Right.
And after a little over a year, we were coming down to the last of our investment. We weren't making enough money to survive on our own, so we needed to do another round. So I helped with the raise, and SlideRocket ended up raising another $5 million,
Okay.
but it was a down round. And so at that point, Mitch had more shares than I did, and he basically called me one day and was like, you're fired right before the down round.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, it's funny. You ever watch that movie, The Social Network?
Yeah, totally.
Facebook thing? Yeah, like I'm the Eduardo Saverin of this SlideRocket story, except I didn't end up making $4 billion and moving to Singapore. But basically, I got crushed in the down rounds.
Okay.
And that is one thing. Like, I was going into this not really understanding the lay of the land, how that stuff really works. Whereas everyone else understood it. Mitch understood it because he had been through it, and the venture capital firm understood it because they do it all the time.
Sure.
And I didn't really understand the ramifications. But it was also kind of a relief to get out of that situation.
Okay.
Because it was really just grinding on me. It was just a fight every day. And lots of uncomfortable conversations.
Sure.
So it was definitely a relief to get out of that situation. And they did, to Mitch's credit, they raised another $5 million and they brought in a CEO from Salesforce.
Okay, yeah.
And they ended up selling the company to VMware, a publicly traded company, within a year and a half.
Oh,
so,
wow.
It was actually a really good outcome.
Sure.
For the company.
Yeah. Fair.
And I still had some peace, so it made a meaningful difference in my life, just not at the scale I was originally hoping for.
Sure.
And it was actually kind of a shame because I guess at the end of the day, VMware didn't know what to do with the product and ended up selling it to a competitor. And it's still around, but the competitor has never really done anything with it, which is a shame because it was a pretty amazing product. It's still the best presentation platform that I've worked with.
Sure.
And I've worked with a lot of them.
Interesting.
But again, on the lessons learned, it's, I don't know. I would definitely do things differently the next time around.
Right.
I learned a lot about working with other people. I learned a lot about managing a cap table. I learned a lot about making sure that, that the relationships with the investors are good. But it was also, again, it was relief, and it worked out. It worked out in a way that ended up being okay for everyone.
Sure. Okay. So if I remember correctly, you took some time off after this whole thing happened, or when did you take some time off?
Okay, so I took a couple months off because like emotionally I was just beat up.
Sure, I can imagine.
But then after a few months, I got pretty bored, and I called up a former competitor and went in and met with them. There was a company out of New York that had been my competition before SlideRocket.
Okay.
And they had a very similar view about being enterprise focused.
Okay.
And I still had these customers hanging around. I still had HBO, I still had Sony, I still had NBC, and like I still didn't know what to do with them because SlideRocket wasn't going to help them.
Right.
So I went to these guys and said, look, let me come in, let me consult with you, let me bring these, let me try to bring these customers into your platform. These guys wanted to move to the cloud. So I was like, look, I can tell you, how I might go about doing that based on my experience. And it actually turned into a pretty good working relationship for 4 years.
Wow.
It's a company called Custom Show.
Okay.
Still based in New York, still with a really good online presentation platform.
Okay.
And enterprise focused. And that was actually great for a long time. And I worked with them. I was never a full-time employee. I was kind of a consultant.
Sure.
But I helped them with a bunch of sales. I helped them with product development. At some point during my career, I switched from being a developer into being more of a manager and a sales and marketing guy.
Got you.
But I still knew a lot about software development. So, I was good at helping to manage projects and just trying to help the technology along. But I was also really good at the sales piece and some of the marketing stuff.
Sure.
I'm just really good at talking to people at big companies just because I've been doing it for my entire career.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I did that for a while, and we actually tried to raise money for that company. We built out the cloud-based platform. We tried to raise money, and I think with that company, it was actually that company had been around for 50 years doing presentations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they used to do like actual slides. They did poster boards. Like they would build big poster boards for presentations, and then they got into slides, and then they got into PowerPoint, and then they were like, we're going to build our own platform, and then they started moving it to the cloud over the course of 50 years.
Wow.
And so I think for that company, it was really hard to make the transition to being a venture-backed company.
Sure.
I think for venture, you really need to be willing to grow quickly.
Fair.
And you really need to be looking for an exit.
Got you.
And I think they were not really prepared to do those things.
Got you.
And at some point, I figured out that I wasn't going to be able to add a lot more value there. And I actually, this is where I took the time off.
Okay.
Where I've been a music guy my entire life.
Sure.
And I don't know, maybe I hit my midlife crisis. I was 42 at the time.
Okay.
But I was doing more and more music stuff. I played the guitar for years. I was in a band. I was DJing around the city. I was starting to build out a home recording studio and do some music production.
Sure.
And, I was realizing that this company was not going to grow the way I wanted it to grow. And so at 42, I said, I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I could take some time off, focus on music, and no one's going to care. And this may be the last time in my life that I can do this.
Sure.
So I planned for, a while, saved some money. I had some money from the SlideRocket thing, and said, okay, gave my notice, and took 2 years off to do music.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was amazing. It was really an amazing opportunity. And, I was living in New York. I was building out a home recording studio. I was working with rappers and with singers,
Sure.
creating songs, other music guys. Like, it was really cool. And I think, my entire life I'd been sort of torn between music and tech.
Got you.
And I'd never really focused on the music thing.
Sure.
So it was fun doing that for a couple of years. And of course, 2 months after I leave my job and start doing music full time, I meet this amazing girl.
Okay.
Who's a banker. So she's like a responsible adult. But she and I got along great, and she put up with me while I was essentially jobless for 2 years.
Sure.
And we started dating.
Okay.
And after a year, she got this opportunity to come down to Miami for her job.
Okay. Interesting.
And neither of us had ever thought about moving to Miami, but we came down and checked it out, and we were both like, this actually seems kind of cool.
Have either of you ever been to Miami before this?
Yeah, we had both done a
Okay.
little bit of hanging out in Miami, but
Okay.
really only in South Beach, like never in the city of Miami.
Got you. Okay.
So part of what we did, we came down twice and just drove around and hung out and just kind of tried to get the lay of the land, and we both really liked the feel of it.
Sure.
And I think after 20 years in Europe, like I was ready to make a switch.
Got you.
And so came down here. It turns out we love it. Was here for about 8 months and then went to a tech conference here called Emerge.
Okay. Yeah.
That happens here on South Beach, right down the street from where I live. And it was actually way more crowded and way more interesting than I thought it would be. Hadn't really connected with the tech scene in Miami. I was trying to do the music thing.
Right.
But actually really got excited about the tech scene. Like there was a lot going on in the startup world. And I had been doing a little bit of consulting. So I'd been working with a successful Kickstarter company called Kidio that makes this cat device that you
Sure.
can interact with your cat from your iPhone while you're not there. You can feed your cat. There's a laser pointer you can run around. It's cool.
That's awesome.
And so it was great. I was helping them. I'd help them with their pitch deck and their financial model and talking to investors. And so when I went to the Emerge conference, I ended up meeting a recruiter there. And I said, I'm looking to consult with companies. I'm not looking for a full-time gig. And she said, well, we only do full-time gigs. But then sure enough, a couple of weeks later, called me up and said, look, I might have a consulting gig for you. So I got hooked up with a startup up in Aventura with a founder who wanted to help people connect with their passions and was trying to build a software platform social network around that.
Okay.
And so that got me started in Miami, consulting in Miami, working with startups. And again, it was around sort of product development, customer validation, financing, fundraising. And I just started to connect with the tech scene down here, started going around to events, trying to meet as many people as possible. And Miami's great. Like, it's so easy to talk to people down here and meet people, and there's a ton of cool people doing great stuff. And so for the past year, I've just sort of built on that, which, now I've been consulting with a few different startups down here, and then I started mentoring Venture Hive. So I met Susan Amat, who runs Venture Hive, right before she had a class of cohort of 10 companies coming into the accelerator there.
Sure.
And she was like, do you want to mentor these 10 startups for 12 weeks? And I said, yes.
That's awesome.
So I started splitting my time between the consulting and the mentoring. And it's just been great. Like, I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love talking to different people. I love having a window into all these different companies. Like, I learn a lot, but I also have a ton of experience that I've been through a lot.
Sure.
And I've seen a lot. So, I can help with operations. I can help with fundraising. I can help with strategy. I can help with sales. I can help with marketing, because I've done all that stuff.
Sure.
And it's been a really nice blend between the teaching and the consulting. Like, I like that combination.
Right.
And I'm still not sure what I actually want to do. I wasn't really intending to build a consulting company, but I sort of have. And I've got, some decent clients now, and I'm starting to bring in other consultants to partner with me on stuff. And it's, there's a lot of people to work with down here. I don't know, and I'm really enjoying it.
I think that's awesome. You kind of fell into it, right?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. And I don't know, I also feel like with the music stuff, I did music pretty much full time for 2.5 years. And then I got really sucked back into the tech world to the extent that I've been doing, for the past 6 months maybe, I've just been doing the tech full time and not as much music.
Sure.
And I actually feel okay about that for the first time in my entire life. I'm okay doing just the one thing. So that's kind of a relief.
That's interesting.
It wasn't really the outcome I was expecting. I was expecting the music thing to really, become my next career. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot longer for me to become a successful musician who can pay the bills with music than I'm really willing to suffer through.
Sure.
It sort of feels like the architecture thing did to me, where it's just like a lot of years of hard work and not a lot of reward.
Sure.
But the fact that I can put the music down for a minute and just focus on one thing has actually been incredibly relaxing.
No, that's actually really interesting, and it's really it's almost like good advice without kind of being advice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, do you think you'll ever do another startup? Have you thought about it, or that's not even really on your radar?
Yeah, I think about it all the time.
Okay.
And I get tempted a lot. I hear some ideas sound really good. Some people are great, and I really want to work with them.
Sure.
And I'm always open to that, and I'm always going around and talking to new people. And the consulting business doesn't really scale. I've kind of hit my wall in terms of the number of hours I'm willing to work.
Got you.
And in how much I'm able to charge a startup. Because I like sort of the early stage startups who don't necessarily have tons of money sitting around.
Sure.
So I don't want to raise my price, and price myself out of those early stage companies.
Got you.
But I think about this a lot. So what I'm actually trying to do, and where the articles I'm posting on LinkedIn come in, is how can I broaden the scope of people I'm reaching,
Sure.
and is there a way to help more people and maybe drive some revenue that's not time-based?
Sure.
So, and I learn a lot. I'm talking to companies all the time. I'm talking to a lot of different founders who are solving a lot of different problems. And I have a bunch of experience that I can bring into the conversation. So I'm trying to get that information out into the world and maybe see if there's a way to build a layer of self-directed content that companies can benefit from. That again isn't my consulting time. Some of it's free, some of it maybe paid. I haven't really figured that out yet.
Sure.
And then add my consulting time as a layer on top of that.
Got you. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So that's my current vision, and that's what I'm working on now.
Sure.
Which mostly has resulted in me writing a lot of free articles. I'm not trying to charge anyone anything right now. I'm just trying to figure out, what my voice is and what really connects with entrepreneurs.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. And you've been on a pretty awesome journey.
Yeah, I've seen so much, right?
Sure. No, it's awesome. That's really why I wanted, to have you on the show, is because, I kind of wanted you to basically tell your entire journey. And, I was hoping we could maybe dive in a little bit more into kind of what you're doing currently and, your articles and whatnot. And I think we're kind of coming to the end of the show. But I think it would be awesome to maybe have you on again in the future, and we kind of dive a little bit deeper into, kind of what you're talking about, give more advice and whatnot, almost do like a part 2 of this, because I think there's so much more that we could cover, and there's so much more value that you could really add to the listener, right?
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great.
Sure.
And
So
that's sort of what I'm trying to get at with the articles I'm posting, is get into that like practical day-to-day, what can you actually do to help grow your business better or more quickly or smarter.
sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. But Mike, we are kind of running out of time, so maybe let's close the show with mentioning
Great.
where people can find yourself online, where people can get more information about Venture Hive and your consulting company, Tonic Studios, and where they can check out the articles that you're writing.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Mike Lingle. It's Lingle, like single with an L.
And I'll post these in the show notes.
Okay. So the URL for that is just mikelingle.com.
Perfect.
And that connects you you can find all the articles from there. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find on LinkedIn as well. You can just look for Mike Lingle Slide Rocket or Venture Hive.
Okay.
Venture Hive is at venturehive.com, so you can find them there, and they're a terrific Miami accelerator and incubator. So companies are in that space, working out of that space. They have a terrific education and mentoring program.
Okay.
So I'm easy to find. They're easy to find. I'm in Miami. It's fun to meet up in person here. And I'm actually getting married next week, so I'll be out of pocket for a few weeks. But starting sort of the beginning of July, I'm back and ready for action.
Sure. No, that's awesome, Mike. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be on the show. I really do think that we should put together a second episode where we kind of dive a little bit deeper into advice and kind of some of the stuff you cover in your articles, because I think it would be really valuable to, the listener and whatnot. And I would love to have you back on the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to talking further.
Perfect, man. Well, have fun with the wedding and the honeymoon, and I look forward to connecting with you once you're back and kind of back to reality, I guess, right?
It's going to be an amazing few weeks, and then I'll be back at my desk.
Well, sure. Sounds good, man. All right, well...
with a ring on my finger.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Congrats again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.